All right, so we're starting off on Capital is Dead, Is This Something Worse by McKenzie Wark. Wark is a professor of media and cultural studies at the New School in New York. Previously lived in Australia, born in Australia. These are some of Wark's books, including General Intellects, which came out right before this latest one. Looks kind of like a textbook, covers an awful lot of contemporary thinkers from the left. Wark wrote this book, 50 Years of Recuperation of the Situationists International. I pulled a quote from LibCom to kind of describe the Situationists in case you've never heard of them. The history of the Situationists seems to be fairly influential on Wark. It says the Situationists were the first revolutionary group to analyze capitalism in its current consumerist form. Then as now, in the West, most workers were not desperately poor, toiling 12 hours a day in factories and mines, but the poverty of everyday life had never been greater. Workers were not beaten down with savage repression so much as with illusions in empty consumer goods or spectacles, which were imbued by culture and marketing with characteristics they don't really possess. For example, that purchasing this or that gadget or brand of shoes will make your life complete, or make your sad life like that of the celebrities and models culture shows us. And a little bit more from there, the Situationists argued that increased material wealth of workers was not really enough to stop class struggles and ensure capitalism's perpetual existence, as many of the left had argued at the time. And since authentic human desires would always be in conflict with alienated capitalist society, Situationist tactics include attempting to create situations where humans would interact together as people, not mediated by commodities. They were a big deal in the late 60s, and the group, the Situationist International, only lasted about 15 years, but they had a lot of impact on the development of future leftist thought and criticism of consumer capitalism. So this resonates deeply with McKenzie Wark. Basically what I've done is I've pulled out of the introduction to this book, Capital is Dead, some big points, and then next week I'll move into chapter 1, probably chapter 2. But some of the big themes include this idea that we are the product that is being sold in the contemporary economy. That indeed we labor, all of us in this economy labor all the time without even really realizing it, kind of fooled into thinking that we are entertaining ourselves at the same time. Another big theme that comes out is Wark's frustration with, why can't we let go of this term capitalism? She's going to insist that that capitalism is dead, that capitalism is a concept that no longer fits the economy that is developing, the nascent economy that's developing. But we have this this longing to hold on to it. And she says both the left and the right want to hang on to this term capitalism and find it very difficult to think in any other terms, as though capitalism is an eternal concept. Also, she says, why do some people on the left tend to worship Marx, almost as though Marxism is a kind of religion, and that we have to stay true to Marx in every respect and engage in basically textual analysis of Marxian works in order to find out the true Marx. Wark is very frustrated by academics and intellectuals who spend a lot of time trying to find the true anything, the true Marx in this case, because in doing so, their minds, their intellects have kind of ossified. They have turned into, in fact, Wark criticizes them for creating a sort of culture industry or becoming a part of the culture industry. And he says, beware of being stuck on the fly tape of the culture industry. Those are my words, but that's Wark's argument. And another interesting theme that comes out here is that there's this general intellect that develops, at least I think Marx said the general intellect develops in its full force in capitalism. As people become more connected, as they work together in social settings more and more and more we get what you might call team thinking, collective thinking, and in the process of producing new goods, this general intellect comes into being. But in Marx's thought, it was captured by the capitalists, who privatized it and didn't allow that general intellect to kind of think its way to the next level in which people might be better off. Wark takes this concept of the general intellect and this idea that it is captured by something, and she makes the argument that it's captured by this new class that I'll talk a little bit more about soon, the Vectoralist class. But first, Wark argues that there's this hacker class that has developed. Well, who is involved in this hacker class? Normally we think of hackers as coders, right? Tech nerds, right? One of the novel aspects of Wark's argument is that, in a way, the economy and technology is transformed to the point where we are all, or almost all of us, are members of this hacker class. She says there's a common class interest in all kinds of information making, whether in the sciences, technology, media, culture, and art. What we have in common is producing new information, but not owning the means to realize its value. So this would include the coders of the world, but it would also include the consumers of the world, those of us who have smartphones, which is the vast majority at this point, people with some access to a computer, whose every action online is potentially recorded somewhere and turned into information that can be used by others to decide what should be made, where it should go, probably most importantly for the consumer, what you want at any given point in time. And I'm sure you've noticed that somehow when you express interest online about anything, somehow out of the woodwork comes multiple ways of attempts to sell you something related to that interest. So anyway, in this way, the consumer is a hacker too. And this is maybe a little bit hard for people to grasp. The consumer is the product in the sense that we are providing the information, which is then sold, so to speak, to the producers of things that can be sold to us. All right, so for instance, she says, if you're getting your media for free, this usually means that you are the product. If the information is not being sold to you, then it is you who are being sold. So back in the days of broadcast television, which really, historically speaking, wasn't that long ago, we see an early instance of this where, you're getting your television programs for free, and that's great, but you have to watch these advertisements, right? And so the way that the TV people made money, of course, was to sell advertising space. But they were really selling our attention to the advertisers. Now, of course, things have gotten so much more sophisticated, and the many ways in which this can happen have just proliferated, right, with the internet. But through all of our actions and all of the information that can be extracted from us from our actions online, and even our movements in space as we take our cell phones around, they can record where we go, what stores we enter into. All of that information is being sold to people who want to sell us more things. So in effect, one of the sort of chilling things about this book is it begins to dawn on you how much you are unconsciously working for the very companies that you buy your goods from. How tied up you are and enmeshed within that system. Now, we all knew this before in a way, so I'm not saying that this is absolutely new information, but Wark has a way of alerting you to this in a way that kind of makes it sink in more, and you realize how much you are working for free and how tied up everybody seems to be in this system. Here's another quote. If you think your social media is spying on you, just imagine what kind of information your bank has on you. There's a whole political economy that runs on asymmetries of information as a form of control. It may even amount to a new class relation. And she's going to argue that it does amount to a new class relation. And so there's a layer on top of the older economy that is emerging and is controlling more and more of it, creating this new class relation. All right, so another quote, information technology is a sort of meta technology designed to observe, measure, record, control, and predict what things, people, or indeed other information can or will or should do. Now, Wark says many people who are still kind of embedded in their minds in that older economy tend to think of this new information layer as not even really real. They still want to know who owns the property, right? Who controls the actual hardware, especially of things that are made, and tends to say this is kind of an immaterial thing that we don't really need to focus on. But she points out that this has become such a huge part of our economy and really runs it. So for Wark, that means the introduction of this new class, which is called the Vectoralist class. So this new Vectoralist class involves, quote, the extraction of surplus information out of individual workers and consumers in order to build predictive models which further subordinate all activity to the same information political economy. One where you are nothing but a user, and everything you do within hearing range of echo, or every movement you make on your cell phone, or everything you do on your laptop is captured by a vector and fed into computation to figure out how to better use you for the greater glory of Amazon, Google, Apple, or some other company, owned and controlled by a new kind of ruling class, the Vectoralist class. Wark very much wants to argue that this is important, that this new class has risen to the top, that it's the top layer now, and that because of that, this is something new, this system. It has a lot to do with asymmetries of information. Now, we get a lot more information, or at least let's say this, we have access to a lot more information, and some people make tremendous use of that, right? So a lot of you watching this do that, right? You're on the internet all the time, but you're trying to absorb a lot of information, learn how the world works, learn how to better take control of your situation, and so on. But yet, even though we have more information, and there's more potential for us to self-educate than ever before, and to investigate the things that we maybe want to purchase and so on, there is this huge asymmetry of information. Wark wants to argue, and it's true. I don't think there's any way to really dispute that. There's this huge asymmetry of information that makes the people like us who mainly use the internet to entertain ourselves and to get information, actually workers and products being sold. And the bigger point of this is that Wark is disputing the old notion that the capitalism, the way that we think of it, even exists anymore, right? Who are the people in charge of the economy and who are extracting the most value out of it, right? Used to be probably people who own property, right? The property owners, like factory owners and before them, farmers, right? Landowners. But the bottom line of this introduction is that the people in charge are not the ones who produce the things, and they are not even the people who produce the information technology, the so-called hacker class, which includes us, but the people who wield that technology by making information proprietary. This is very important. Taking that general intellect, or what's potentially general knowledge, and continuing to try to hold it down, to pin it down, to take something that is common or general and wield it as their exclusive domain. And as you know, the internet is always kind of threatening to get out of control, right? Like, it's very difficult for people to control their intellectual property, their artistic property, and so on. But the people at the top, the Vectoralist class, are always working to try to extract value and to maintain ownership. Not the authors, but the people involved in selling the ideas, right, to others. So we have this example of the Tyson product, Anytizers, right, which I've never had. I think it's a sort of chicken nugget of some kind. I'm not sure. No. But however, you have to ask yourself, okay, how does this product come into being? This very unhealthy, unnatural product, I suppose you might say, but probably really tasty. Well, and who really profits from it? Well, you know, farmers who want to try to farm chickens these days may own their land. And back in the day, that might have meant that they'd be pretty powerful as landowners, potentially influential in their own community and up the food chain. But now a lot of farmers have, in order to stay in business, have had to farm their chickens through a contract with a company like Tyson. So when that is the case, they may own their farm and they may even own their equipment, but Tyson has the system that it takes to take the chickens that they produce and create a market for them and take that product all the way from, from birth to Anytizers in, with using all sorts of different areas of the economy, right? So you've got the farmer producing the chicken, and he has to do it according to the contract exactly as Tyson specifies in a mass production system. And then, you've got the transport. It's got to be all figured out. Tyson owns the intellectual technology, the information technology, to be able to figure out exactly how much chicken is needed, exactly where it will go, to what processing facilities, and from there to how it will be distributed to stores, and of course how it will, most importantly perhaps, how it will be packaged, how it will be advertised. There's a lot of general intellect involved in there too, right? A lot of people working together and separately to create the Tyson product. But ultimately, the people at the very top of the corporation are the ones who control, even without knowing very much about the technology involved, they are the ones who control the power of it and who create this entire system which spans countries, right? Is global for their own benefit. So Wark says the dominant ruling class of our time no longer maintains its rule through the ownership of the means of production as capitalists do, nor through the ownership of land as landlords do. The dominant ruling class of our time owns and controls information. And Wark is going to argue that this is very different. This ownership class is an ownership class of information, right? And it's really no longer about property. Somebody in China may own the factory that processes the products of a corporation, right? Is the owner of the Chinese factory the powerful one? Sure, they're making some money, but ultimately they also are a kind of contractor and a part of a system that could only be developed with the incredibly advanced technology, information technology that we have now. And who controls that? The people at the very top of the corporation control that. So anyway, as we move into the book, I'll probably get to chapters 1 and maybe 2 next week. We'll see if this holds up and if Wark can really make the argument that we are no longer living in capitalism, but something else. All right, see you next time.